community together to learn about the natural world and the people who study it, learn from it, and protect it. This series is offered for free as a benefit to our community, but of course we welcome donations to help support this and other programs offered by Ventura Land Trust. The suggested donation is $10. You can contribute at the table outside. You can also pull out your phone, go to venturalandtrust.org and make a donation there if you feel so inclined. One thing I want to do real quickly as we get started is point out Mickey from Surf Rodeo. Where'd you go, Mickey? Oh, there she is right there. If you are interested in learning more about renting out this venue, it is available for rent. So she's the one that you want to talk with. Quickly, I wanted to provide a couple of VLT updates. Harmon Canyon Preserve and the Ventura Hills Nature Preserve are both currently open, although only for a little while today, till they close for the evening. But as a reminder, if you do visit, please keep your dogs on a leash and pick up after them, follow all of the preserve rules, and make sure that you're looking out for rattlesnakes. As you know, we've had a pretty banner year for rattlesnakes. I also wanted to make a quick announcement that tickets for our big annual event, the Wild and Scenic Film Festival, are currently on sale. That event will be August 22nd, and we're in a new venue. We're moving it to the Ventura Theater downtown. So we will have the main festival out on Chestnut Street with all the booths and community partners and activities. Our VIP section will be just down the street at Leashless Brewing with Mother's Tacos serving food. We've got 2 showings this year, a matinee showing at 2 o'clock and then the evening showing at 7, and they're different programs. So you can buy a ticket for one or the other or for both. You can get a double feature ticket. And we are still seeking sponsors. So if you are interested in sponsoring the event, make sure you speak with me or one of the members of my team. Allie and Jeff are also here. You guys will just wave and say hello. Awesome, thank you. All right, so on to tonight's program. Ethan McKinley leads Channel Islands National Park with a deep commitment shaped by more than 2 decades of National Park Service experience, guiding the stewardship of one of America's most ecologically rich and culturally significant island landscapes. Under Ethan's leadership, the park continues to advance groundbreaking cultural preservation and natural conservation work, from protecting globally important biodiversity to strengthening the scientific partnerships that support the island's long-term resilience. A recent graduate of the Department of the Interior's Senior Executive Service Candidate Development Program, Ethan also completed an executive assignment with NASA, contributing insights that later supported critical decision-making during the SRI firefight. The experience added a national-level perspective to ongoing efforts to connect cutting-edge earth science with on-the-ground management at Channel Islands. Ethan lives here in Ventura, where free time is often spent outdoors. Big surprise, right? Mountain and road biking, climbing, mountaineering, hiking, camping, and exploring national parks across the country. A lifelong student of history and an avid photographer, Ethan brings both passion and perspective to inspiring others to protect and appreciate the Galapagos of North America. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Ethan.
So who wears a suit in Ventura on a hot day? I have regrets. Good evening, everyone. I am just thrilled there's a packed house tonight, not because there was a fire, but because we have a community that surrounds our gateway here in Ventura that is deeply passionate and committed to this park. Takes this place very personally, watches the sunset over it on many a night. So I want to thank you for being here and showing a great deal of interest. I got really jazzed up by the fact that we were sold out, and I thought, gosh, there's so much curiosity. I'm going to create a 56-slide PowerPoint. And so I did. So fair warning, there are a lot of photos. I promise I will try to get through this in under an hour. But we do have a lot to show you that hasn't gotten out to the public, some of it. No top secrets or anything like that. But I want to share with you a story from behind the scenes. What happens during a fire this significant in such a remote place as Santa Rosa Island, over 40 miles off of our shore here. And it was a dramatic firefight, I think you'll agree, but it's just the beginning of the story. What I really want you to take away at the end of the night is that we have a long road ahead of us and quite a lot to learn about how we're going to get there. We only know so much right now after initial assessments. So I'm going to share with you what I know, what I can share with you, and as I said, we're still learning, so forgive me if some of this is kind of a beta version and we're just kind of feeling our way through and trying to share with you in real time versus polishing this as you know, smooth stone might be over years. Can I get a quick head count real quick so I just can gauge the level of familiarity in the crowd? We're going to start with kind of a beginner one. Who's been to a national park? Okay. Everyone, or some people were too afraid and peer pressure next to them. So who's been to Channel Islands National Park? Wow, okay. That's great, we've got a bunch of pros, that's fantastic. It's wonderful to have a community like this, is so engaged with it. This is a hard place to get to. People really get intimidated by the fact that they're gonna be out on a boat for hours, out in a park for hours with no services, in a remote experience that they might not have had a chance to have before. And it takes a lot of commitment to get out there. So it looks like I found myself in the right place, or you found yourself in the right place to learn more about it. All right, so I think we're just gonna dive right in. Learn a little bit more about what happened. I broke this into, so if you start snoozing after 15, 20 minutes, I broke it into 4 sections, so it would be easy to navigate. I know where I am now. What are we talking about? So the first section is park and island overview, and then we're going to talk about the fire itself and the response to that. What else is there to talk about? There's a lot more to talk about. We're going to talk about the fire impacts, what we know about initial assessments, as well as we already have we're the federal government, we already have a 200+ page plan in hand that I actually had to review today. And recovery through science. What do we know about what we're going to do about it right now? And I can share some of that with you. All right. This is on the west side of Santa Rosa Island near China Camp. A place that's really very difficult to get to after a long day on a boat. So, and here's a shot of Channel Islands National Park. We're up there in the upper right-hand corner currently, kind of looking oblong at maybe 25 degrees towards Anacapa and Santa Cruz, and sometimes on a super clear day you can spot Santa Rosa out there, but more likely it's when you're driving up the coast towards Gaviota that you can see that. And I forgot to do some acknowledgements here, so I'm going to do those first. I've got a lot of people to thank. It's been a crazy, absolutely, earth-shifting sort of month where we've had a lot of people show up to help this park. But I do want to thank the shoulders that we're standing on right now. We've got the former superintendent here, Russell Gallipo, who's now on the board of the McKinley. We have the former natural resources chief, who had a lot to do with the Channel Islands fox getting off of the endangered species list. That's Kate Faulkner. We have our former cultural resources chief, Ann Houston, who has built a fantastic program of engagement with the history of this island and its current relatives in the tribe. So thanks for being here. And I think I see Yvonne Menard hiding behind someone back there. But we had the pleasure of working with her as the Chief of Interpretation and Education and Visitor Services at Channel Islands National Park. How many years was it, Yvonne? I'm sorry, I don't want to get this wrong.
30.
33?
30.
30, okay. right on the nose. That's a nice round number. And right next to it, and her husband also worked at the park, and I'm sorry we didn't get to work together. Real quickly, I know we have one or two of the Channel Islands National Park Foundation board members here too, and they're working around the clock right now to help us. So if you could stand up for a second if you're here. Sue, thank you for being here. She also in her spare time runs a native plant garden and has a job, and does an amazing amount of things for the park, but is currently engaged in helping us plan for more housing on the island, which is a really important part of what you're going to learn about. I almost forgot, our current PIO, Public Information Officer, new Public Information Officer, Anna Cholo, who's been, if you guys have seen the stories on the New York, or the LA Times, and the New York Times for that matter, Anna was behind a lot of that, so thank you for being here. Okay, back to this presentation. We have 56 slides. So, Channel Islands National Park was originally Channel Islands National Monument, and that was started in 1938, so FDR. That was Anacapa and Santa Barbara Island. It expanded to incorporate 5 islands, long story short, in 1980 into the national park. And now it consists of those beautiful 5 islands, as well as the waters around them. So it's about half water, half terrestrial land. And it's an incredible place, I think you'll agree. The enabling legislation of this park reads much like a dictionary. It has about a baker's dozen worth of things that are set aside for it, from paleontology to archaeology to biomes you can't find anywhere else on Earth, to 2 ocean currents that meet and create this really unique environment that really promotes endemic species. We have almost 150 of those on the islands you can't find anywhere else on Earth. So believe me when I say that the Galapagos of North America, well, it's kind of a tagline. We think they should be the Channel Islands of South America, but it is a, it kind of gives you the idea, right? There's speciation on these islands that we need to set aside, along with the human history. Is some of the oldest in North America and plays a critical role in the peopling of the Americas. Each one of these islands has its own set of species, and this park is unlike anywhere else on Earth. So I'm going to go through a few of these values, but the paleontological record, we have things like pygmy mammoths and Sirenian sea cows, which I found out from my 4.5-year-old really sound like fairy tales, right? And they are. You kind of have to look up, what is a pygmy mammoth? That's an oxymoron if I've ever heard one. And these are species that develop uniquely out on these islands and tell the story of ancient history that we have with our animals that are constantly evolving. Scientific values. This one's really unique. This one only exists in the enabling legislation of a handful of national parks around the country. Despite our reputation for protecting science and trying to understand these resources better so we can protect them with science, scientific values are not written out explicitly in most enabling legislations, which means we have an extra high bar at this park when it comes to science. We take it seriously, we promote its practice, we use it vigorously to understand the resource. Archaeological resources. I mentioned one of the oldest places in North America. We have here discovered human remains that exceed 13,000 years in age. For grounding, that's about 650 generations of people on an island. So imagine that constant presence there over the millennia of people and those most recent relatives, the Chumash, here practicing in the park, and that's part of it. They will remind you that it's not about history, and not all of it. It's about the modern practice of that history. So that's a lot in a little. Mediterranean ecosystem and endemic species. We just mentioned a couple of things that go into that, and I'll talk a little bit more about inventory monitoring and the high protocol that we have in the park in terms of understanding these species well. Historic structures, landscapes, and sites. We have ranching era history. We have military history over the years, lighthouse. We've got an incredible amount of stories to be told, and that's just getting into the structures that exist. And beyond that, the Spanish, Mexican, and Chumash history goes back really far. And then, of course, how do we get a current generation to get inspired to learn about this place and protect it? Well, that's how we see outdoor recreation. So, and I'm sorry if I'm blocking your view here, kind of perched on the right in front of you. So that is the Sea Ranger 2 floating up there at the top of the screen. This is a bunch of kelp, which we study, and that's not all we study. This is Channel Islands National Park is known as capital P Prototype Park, and it's a prototype because it was the first in the National Park Service among a new class of parks that sought to better understand their resources. And we had made a lot of decisions and studied things when they became a problem, but we found out that nature is far too complex, and you need to know about it before it becomes a problem if you're going to have a successful intervention when there is an issue. And boy, did we learn that lesson here. We had the fastest mammalian species recovery in history that happened right on these islands in the Channel Islands, fox. I'm not going to go too far into that story. There's a lot else that went into it, but Kate Faulkner could tell you that story. Maybe she can get up after me. So a little bit about the protocols. We track everything from having a dive team out for about 5 to 6 months a year, going every other week down under the water for 5-day tours, counting 33 transects around the islands and all the incidents of life thereon. Transects are big, essentially cannonballs on either side of a chain. They're about 100 meters long, and they're looking for oceanic health, is what they're trying to measure. And that's common among the terrestrial monitoring as well, where we're looking at wildlife, vegetation, birds. We're looking at a variety of what we call benchmark species, and we're trying to look at the islands as something living, which they are, but as an organism. And so we look for what we call vital signs in the ecosystem to understand when some things are going well and when there's signs of change, and if we need to do anything about it, that's how we make that decision.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Oh yeah, sure. Can you, I can be really loud. Is that better?
Much better.
Am I blowing you out in the front row when I do that? Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, just keep the mic closer, I think.
Yeah, sure thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were getting some reverb on the mic, so let me see what I can do. So we have here the island fox you probably recognize, and given the amount of people in this room that have been to the Channel Islands, you've probably seen one in person. Then we have the scrub jay, 30% bigger on the islands, and our little island spotted skunk friend here, and a variety of herps on the islands that don't get enough coverage, to be honest. But where we are studying actively a dynamic between the two furry ones on the left. And as the populations in foxes rise, we're seeing a similar decline that almost looks like a correlation, and trying to understand that in this spotted skunk population. So we're really curious to see what this fire does on Santa Rosa Island without those populations. Santa Rosa Island. So this is a picture I think of pretty often, because it's really easy to just bliss out when you're up on one of these ridges on the islands. This is taking a look at one of the trees that is part of what we call the cloud forest, which is an ancient oak forest of old growth trees that are right there on the ridgeline, and have been, we think, since pre-contact times. So we have some very, very old trees out there. It's a subject of a lot of science. For the last 15 years, we've had USGS scientists working out there, Catherine McKeecher, who's done most of that time. And we're using volunteers and partners to essentially secure this forest, and they have been essentially getting too much root exposed, losing a lot of soil, and we saw some of those trees starting to trend down and tip towards the slopes of the mountains here. And it's been a massive project, trying to essentially engineer soil is what it came down to, and it's ongoing today as we speak. The California Institute of Environmental Studies is actively engaged and just got a new grant this year to re-up the research and the applied restoration that's going on in these forests. But that's not all that's on Santa Rosa Island. It's about 84 square miles. It's a little over 50,000 acres. And it's just absolutely stunning. It's a little beyond the reach of most of our visitors. Most of our visitors stop at Anacapa or Santa Cruz Island. Those that make it out to Santa Rosa are a hardier bunch. It takes over 3 hours each way to get out there. And once you're out there, you're out there. It's an experience. There's a pier, but that's about all the amenity you're gonna find. And there's a campground, but most of the access, if you wanna explore the island, it's really backcountry. And what else can I say? 7 listed vegetation species on federally protected species on the island. There is island fox, there's the skunk that I mentioned, and just a stunning history. It is absolutely a beautiful place. It's highly memorable. Lobo Canyon looks a lot like a slot canyon. From that to the Torrey Pines, which are one of only 2 of that type of pine tree grows in the world. So one of the rarest species on earth of pine, and a lot more to appreciate. It's also one of the last really well-preserved Mexican rancho-style ranches in the state. So people stepping off the boat, a lot of them say this is a lot like stepping back 150 years or what they might imagine it to be. I assume they weren't there, in California history. So, context provided. Let's dive into what happened in the Santa Rosa Island Fire. And if you don't mind, I'm going to get out some speaking notes here because things happen very quickly. And there's a reason we do reviews of these things just after the fire because the dates all blend together very quickly. So I want to be accurate with you. So let's go back to May 15th. That was a Friday. And in the morning, early hours while it's still dark out, a commercial pilot was flying over and spotted some fire on Santa Rosa Island and reported it. Our chief ranger got that message through a bunch of different interim telephone calls at about 7 o'clock, I think. And we started to stand up that morning what we call an incident response or an incident management team. We knew right away, fire's bad news. We needed to take this really seriously. And the clock was ticking to get any kind of resources out there because we had impending weather, which we figured out right away. And as of Saturday morning, the islands were going to be pretty inaccessible. So we started. The first thing you do when you're calling together an incident like this is you look at your team and you figure out who's the closest person, and then you have them, just the old-fashioned way, go out there and put their eyes on it and report back with what they see. And we had one of our best, Clark Cowan, out there, and he told us we've got a problem. And he said there's a multi-acre fire, and it looks like it's around Ford Point, but I didn't dare get any closer. And he said, thank you for doing that. We're gonna go ahead and mobilize. So what happened from there on out was the beginning of this. This is the Incident Command Post, the ICP, as we call it. This is where all the wonks sit. These are the decision makers on a fire. They're gathering the resources and information and distributing it to the field and trying to make the best decisions they can with what they have in front of them, get them the supplies they need, call in additional resources like helicopters, tankers, firefighters, whatever it might be. So this is the first thing you start working on, aside from calling up your local hotshot crew, which we did. And so we had a quick response from the hotshots. They were there at mobilizing about 4:30 here in the harbor. We were able to contract an island packer boat and get it out to the islands, and we put them on scene on that evening, and they got there when it was dark. This is really important context. you can't drive a fire truck to the islands. That might be obvious, but this creates a major problem. And it's something you have to plan around constantly. So think of every meal a firefighter eats, the water they're bringing with them. If they need to use the restroom, they actually had wag bags. I'm not going to explain it to those that don't know what that is. But you have to give them essentially everything they need to be self-contained so that they're not worried about taking care of themselves while they're fighting a fire. That's the last thing you want. So we had to not just get firefighters out there, but we had to get their equipment and supplies and food and everything they needed to be successful. And this is our beautiful Surf Ranger. It's a 1954 vessel. It's Korean War era, to give you a little context. And that's how we get anything heavy off the islands, essentially. And so that's how the fire trucks got out. That's how some of the UTVs got out. And some of the things that we couldn't carry in passenger boats, like larger bins of fuel and things like that. And yes, we use fire to fight fire sometimes, and that's why you have fuel sometimes. All right, so this is the end of day one. That is the hotshot crew who came on island. They didn't come with those vehicles. We gave them those vehicles from what we had currently on the island and told them to go where they needed to go. And they thought that night they were going to be camping at a place called Johnson's Lee, which is center south. It's about where the tip is as far south as you can get on Santa Rosa Island. And there's a road, takes a little over an hour to get there, and that's where they went. And that's where this is. You can actually see Johnson's Lee right here. This is one of the structures that burned. It's a garage that's a remnant of an Air Force installation that was out there. And they decided not to camp there, I'll put it that way. So it gives you an idea of how quickly these things evolve. So first there's a commercial pilot that sees it. We think there's something burning. Next, there's someone that goes out there and takes a look at it. I think it's a few acres. And the next thing they see is a wall of flame that was licking up to 30 feet tall, coming over the ridge quickly. And so they decided to hightail it. I'm really glad they took a picture because it really paints the scene, and it's a moment in time that makes it pretty clear why they decided to be safe, head back to park housing. This is one, I think I'm going to try to play this, but we'll see how this goes. I'm not quite sure that we have the audio hooked up. No, it doesn't sound like we do, so I'll narrate it. So what this is what we call an air attack, which is usually a small plane. It usually has someone that's got decades of firefighting experience in it, who's a more senior specialist, and they are sizing up the fire. And you can see the middle is kind of where it's dark, and the flanks, the left shoulder and the right shoulder, and he's about to zoom in on Johnson's Lee to show you where the structures are where there's a lot of activity. This is infrared, obviously. That bright white is flame and heat. So he's saying that is about a third of a mile from that wall of fire that we're looking at. And this was about 10:45 that evening. And at this point, it was just under 1,000 acres. And he's panning up and saying, I think the ranger station and the park housing is okay. It's about 6 miles away. I think we're all right. So we have a hotshot crew out there. We managed to slip out some other folks on Saturday morning just before the gale comes in. And then we have something that happens about once a year on Santa Rosa Island. And that's gale force winds for about 2.5 days. And so these winds got up to about 54 miles per hour up on the ridges. And it was almost nonstop. But they did stop just enough. What it did to the fire behavior was essentially it would stoke the flame, which wind does, but it was blowing from the northwest. So we had all this action coming down this way. And so when we went to bed on Friday night, pretty late, we really thought it's going to blow back to the ocean. I think that's what everyone was thinking. Even though it's pretty hot, the wind's going in the right direction, it's a major wind shift. The fire behaviorists were telling us, and again, they're trying to predict the future, right? So it can't be 100% accurate. But it's something really strange happened, and that's that those flames that got stoked and built up were getting blown back onto the fire, which is good. That's going to tamp the behavior. They'll run out of fuel eventually. But then there were breaks in the wind. There'd be a lull, and that flame would go straight back the other way. And it's what they call chunking, and not the kind you do on island packers. It's when a fire is essentially grabbing chunks of terrain at a time. And a fire like this is really dangerous. It can climb mountains. It can go down mountains. It can cross terrain very easily. So this was not good news when we woke up on Saturday morning and we saw what the wind event was starting to do to the fire. It wasn't what we wanted. It was growing and growing and growing. And so what we had on that morning was essentially the forecast through Monday afternoon. And this was Saturday morning. And we knew that we were dealing with a real problem. And we were trying to mobilize all the resources we could. But the landing craft, that vessel you saw, no good in high seas. So it couldn't get out there for almost 2.5 days. The air tankers, we had a brave pilot take the assignment Saturday morning. He flew in just before the big weather started to hit. And by the time he made his drop, the water went directly sideways and out to sea. No effect. So that was not a solution either. We couldn't rely on that to work, and it was a very dangerous situation anyways, and not sustainable in the firefight. So the fire went up Saturday night to a little under 6,000 acres. It continued to grow by about 5,000 acres a day in these conditions. The 2 hand crews that were out there, including that Hot Shots crew, were doing everything they could. I can attest to their bravery. It was phenomenal to watch what they were trying to do, but there was really nothing to be done. In that type of condition, you just have to fall back and try to fortify structures, which is what they did. So those 2 days, they were wrapping buildings in something that looks a lot like a fire blanket, aluminum, reflective blanket. They were digging lines. At a point where we saw on Monday that it was getting close enough to the main ranch and housing and the campgrounds and the Torrey Pines. The park superintendent has a call to make at that point, and there are 3 tools that are off limits to the firefighters. And those are bulldozers without consultation, tankers with retardant, and tankers with seawater. We were ready to talk about all 3 of those. It was real bad news for us. So bulldozers were one near the main ranch, just a couple of lines to give the firefighters a chance. And then we started to talk about retardant as the wind started to die down. And frankly, the firefighters were losing the fight, and they didn't have the right tools to win. So Monday evening, we start to get into a zone where we send boats out, send additional equipment out, and we start to call tankers. And what happens Monday evening? Simi Valley Fire. So there's a fire that's threatening homes and burning them down, and threatening life. And those 2 things in the wildland firefighting matrix or priorities essentially overrule wildland fire that's not doing either of those. So all tankers at the time in the general area were assigned to that fire with a do not divert order. And no matter how many phone calls I made and the incident commander made and our firefighters made, we couldn't convince them to come over. So I think this was a dark point in the fire. That evening, we sat down kind of defeated, and we had a fire that was over 15,000 acres on our hands, and really a bad fire forecast in terms of the behavior of what was going to happen. So this is a little bit of the mobilization on Sunday, sending new teams out. And this is what we were looking at Monday night. No tankers in sight, hand crews on the ground, one engine, not much. Our hopes that night, I think, were the lowest I've had in a fire. I've seen, old growth sequoia burn, and that was an awful thing. But this was, to have this happen in our park and to be that close to a burn over was awful. And I can tell you that the scenarios that night, Monday evening, were not good. At 6 p.m. we learned 15,000 acres, no tankers. The crews from the field were doing everything they could to create new hand lines, which is essentially about a 3 meter wide line that you're digging with hand tools. And they're doing that along the perimeter of the fire as best they could. And if you take a close look up here, and I'm sorry for those folks in the back, but you can see, hopefully you can see the red part on the fire here, the fire map. The perimeter was set up just on Telephone Road and along the main road that goes over the ridges of Santa Rosa Island. So that night, the prognosis was this. Tomorrow morning you might wake up, the Torrey Pines might be gone, Water Canyon Campground might be gone, the main ranch might be gone, and park housing might be gone. And we had already removed our staff on Sunday evening. We flew them out. It wasn't an evacuation, the fire was safely away, but we needed to get them out of there in terms of park staff before they became an emergency. But obviously really worried about what was going to happen there. And on the northern edge of it, the cloud forest rests. So the cloud forest might have gone that night too, if we lost the ridge. So that morning, Tuesday morning, we came in, and I would later find out that the incident commander, like me, didn't sleep that night, and we were ready for the worst news. But that's not what we got. We got a mixture. And so this was a situation Tuesday morning, and you can see there an air tanker dropping retardant, a pretty big one, and that's Telephone Road on that ridge up there, which is where the hot shots are. They're under that retardant, so they're actually taking this on the ground and fighting that fire actively or directly, as they call it. We learned that the Torrey Pines had burned through that evening, and we had burned through it over 90%. We were told that the fire had calmed down when the winds died down, and that it was a backing fire, which just means it's kind of eating one piece of vegetation on the ground at a time versus that 30-foot wall that we had seen before. So that was somewhat good news. There's hope in the Torrey Pines, though we would find out that there's very high mortality, which we'll talk about later. The cloud forest was still there the next morning. Water Canyon Campground, some way, somehow survived the night. It was completely burned around, and there was one wildland fire crew that saved it. I'll talk about them later. Telephone Road had 3 what we call slopovers, which is when a fire runs beyond a control line. So you've made your line, the fire doesn't care, it just keeps on going, right? And so the hotshot crews were actually, the crew up there was just crew 8 from the Los Padres, the Sundowners. They chased down every one of those multi-acre slop-over fires and surrounded it with hand line. So the work they put in that day was almost superhuman. And I went out there and walked the hand lines. It was just unbelievable what they did. They clearly got the message in terms of how important this place was. And at one point, they were actually ordered by that same senior fire official that's up there in that air attack plane. They were ordered to abandon the line, and they're told to retreat. The fire was too big, the slop overs were too big. Go back to the next line. And I can tell you our next line was no good. They didn't think they could hold it. And they really thought that if it took Telephone Road and burned further, it would take housing, it would take the main ranch. The firefighters would be pushed down to the beach where they couldn't do much, and it would likely take the whole island. Was the thought at that night and the next morning. So the firefighters knew this. Their situational awareness was amazing. They didn't have to, but they did, and they really put themselves on the line to stop it right there. But I can tell you they couldn't have done that if it wasn't for all the air support that came through. These were our best friends on Tuesday and Wednesday. I authorized retardant and saltwater drops, only in certain zones and within certain limitations. But it was the only way to get enough tankers to make a difference, we figured out. These are called super scoopers. They come in from Canada, that's where they're made. And they have inlets on the side of their poles, and they'll land. I just thought they did lakes, but found out now that they do oceans. They'll land at full speed, full flight speed, and essentially just touch the water barely, enough for their tanks to fill up, somehow not crash while doing that. And then they'll come back around on the fire. And so that each drop takes under 10 minutes. And if you're taking a look at what a normal tanker can do, it has to go back to fire base, and it's going to get loaded up with pumps, and it's going to take we were looking at about 90 minutes for a drop, and then a return, and then coming back to the fire. So the fact that they were able to do this in under 10, we're looking on flight radars just over and over and over again, I'm convinced, made the difference that day. I included a second one. I really like these. So, super scoopers were. I thought they were like an item for picking up after pets, but there you go. They're the real deal. So from that day forward, the control on the fire escalated. I'm not going to walk you through every percentage, but remember we're at 15,000 acres right on Monday. The maximum extent was 18,300-ish. So it didn't grow much after that. It infilled a little bit, but it was very tightly controlled on the perimeter. So these are the guys, Los Padres Crew 8, Sundowners. We have an arrowhead being made for the park right now, which is a tradition that we have, and they saved the day. And we let them know it when they got back, but they were really proud of the work they did out there. And I don't think any one of them, according to their words, will ever forget this. These guys are locals, by the way. They're based in Ojai. This is our wildland module out of Whiskey Town, and they are the folks that were in that campground going toe to toe. And I'll show you a picture here in a moment of just how close it was on the fire. But we're another crew that really earned their stripes out there. We have one of ours mixed in there, but he's just become part of that team. So this is the Chumash Fire Department. They were out there on scene. They weren't going toe-to-toe with the fire. We were only able to get them out there once the tankers had come in. But they were out there essentially ensuring that all the cultural resources were well protected during the suppression, and out there doing an initial assessment to see where there had been some damage done. You can't put down a bulldozer line, for example, without doing a bit of damage, so it was good to have them on the ground and immediately start that second person conversation with the tribe. And I've got to say, our team is very proud of their role in this. This was an objective hazard that no one really could have predicted, but I'm very proud of how the staff responded. They've been in the trenches every step of the way. On the island, Clark Cowan was instrumental in showing the firefighters around and getting to understand the resource. We had one of our greats, Tim Jones, actually, he'd been retired for 3 weeks and we hired him back. But he'd worked out on that island for decades and knew it like the back of his hand, so and he could operate the heavy equipment, and they needed someone with local knowledge. So we have there one of our PSAR rangers, Jason, and we've got Taylor, one of our archaeologists, and then Annie Little, who had a lot to do with the bald eagles being restored and rehabilitated on the islands. And then there were some partners a little above us, some angels on our shoulders, if you will. I know Melissa read off about NASA. I did spend some time there last year working with them on a partnership with the Park Service. So we all geeked out over what we could do about understanding what was happening with this fire better. And they actually retasked a couple of satellites to come take pictures of the active fire while it was impacting the island. And we also had that airplane, which is called an ER-2, or Earth Resources 2. It's really a U-2 spy plane, but it has this amazing array of technology on it that'll come in handy. Like, it wasn't handy for the fire, but it'll come in handy in the future in understanding exactly what happened, how severely it burned and where, and how we can recover and really focus on areas that make the biggest difference. All right. Assessment of impacts. Can someone give me a time check real quickly? 7:49. All right, thank you very much. This is another image from NASA. This is infrared. So you're looking at the red areas. That's showing you, in this particular band, healthy vegetation, which I know is not normally red, but in this case it is. The contrast, what you don't want to see are dark colors. And so you can see really vividly, with smoke still in the air on the north side of the fire there, what's happening to the island. So this is Water Canyon Campground. And for those of you that have been to the island that really care about these places deeply, have a deep connection to the place, I apologize that these next photos are going to be a little difficult to watch, but nothing too graphic, just a lot of burnt vegetation in places. So Water Canyon Campground, that wildland fire module went toe-to-toe around every single old, decrepit picnic table that we're about to rebuild. But they did a great job, and they didn't know at the time that we were going to rebuild those, obviously. But it gives you an idea of what they were willing to do to preserve the place and how much it meant to them. And you can see those little pockets around every single one of those wind shelters. They lost one that was unsavable, that had a draft of fire coming up from the canyon, and there was just nothing to do. But I'm going to highlight it anyways. There it is. But it gives you an idea of how hot the fire was burning. To the left there, talking to visitor infrastructure, a lot of folks wonder, and Ventura Land Trust is very active in taking care of trails. A lot of folks wonder what happens when a trail burns. Who cares, right? It's just a trail, you walk on it. Well, if you take a look closely here, there's a lot of rebar. Obviously, it's not good footing. That's going to need to be completely graded, rebuilt, and it's going to require a lot of work, just that one little section. So this is just a sample of what we need to do on trails. So those are kind of a couple of shots of the immediate impact. We'll get into deeper assessment by category here. But fire suppression repairs are needed. Those are the first thing that happen when the fire has been controlled. So there's still patrols going on with wildland firefighters around the island. They're looking for hot spots. They're using drones to look for infrared heat signatures. And in the meantime, closer to the front country, these guys are repairing. Right here is a bulldozer line. You can see it going into the back there, where they felt they needed to defend the area there. And here's a hand line that was put in. That's where we bring our landing craft down there, give you an idea of how close the fire was. This is Water Canyon over there, and then the campground's kind of back to the right of this picture. Those are what we call wattles, which is a really funny word. Might think of penguins when you think of that, waddling around, right? But these wattles are critical to shoring up those hillsides and ensuring that soil doesn't continue to erode over time. So where they have hand lines, they've laid it bare and they really dug into the substrate. They're making sure that they're going back and trying to give it a chance. We have a lot more of that to do. So yeah, this is kind of what I mentioned. There are hotspot patrols going on. Suppression repair efforts were taking place after the fire was abating. We were keeping a close eye on biosecurity and invasive species management, which was really a full-time job. We needed to make sure new species weren't introduced into this really vulnerable landscape. And we're performing, as these two are here, initial assessments. They're using a drone. Some folks might have seen those drones flying over the Torrey Pines, and that's who was flying them. So the next steps are this, and you're going to hear these two words a couple of times. So can you guys say it with me real quick? Bear? Bear, right? But this is BAER, Burned Area Emergency Response. So you're going to be hearing that in the news, online. This is what we're doing for the next 6 to 12 months. This is priority one right now. And I'll explain a little bit how it differentiates from a very similar word, confusingly. Bar. All right. Bear, bar. Completely different. So the emergency response is a team, it's supported by a team that comes out to the park, a bunch of ologists who I'll go through real quickly after this slide. But they're focused on stabilization, they're focused on making things safe, they're focused on not rebuilding the structure, but putting a pole up to keep it from falling over. So these are the folks that are coming in and saying, we just want to stabilize this place so it doesn't get worse, the best we can. Bird area rehabilitation, on the other hand, is something we're going to be talking about for years. The Scorpion Fire happened about 6 years ago, and we're still working on the bar, not the bear, the bar. And that rehabilitation work is essentially years long. You're not just stabilizing a forest, you're trying to make it thrive into the future, which is a much harder thing to do. You're restoring what was there before the fire. Very different mission from the bear, where you're focused on emergency. So these are the things that folks were looking at. We had, hydrologists, archaeologists, wildlife biologists, paleontologists, botanists, geologists, recreation managers, and GIS folks to kind of capture it all and put it on maps. This is the short list of the values at risk. This is what I convey to the team, and that's informed by my staff telling me what's the most important thing on those islands, that no matter what we need to put aside and save. This is that short list. So you're not just talking about listed species, you're talking about endangered species, and one of the listed species. You're talking about some of your charismatic megafauna, the snowy plover, which has federal protections, Torrey Pines, archaeological resources. I think I might have failed to mention that the entire island is a National Archaeological District. So everything's protected when it comes to archaeological resources. And there were hundreds of sites that were burned over. So the People Eating of America story, I'm going to go over this pretty quick because I'm running behind, but that 13,000 plus years of history is essentially what has created, the modern landscape on Santa Rosa Island. So those people's interaction with it, and that manifests in several different ways: artifacts, sites, house pits, that sort of thing. And the way a fire impacts those things, some people think maybe it's like a trail and it just kind of burns over. Another faulty assumption. It can have a profound impact on disturbing those, and essentially having the cover that is there, the dirt or whatever's been protecting them for thousands of years, blow away or wash away without anything to hold it down. So we have a lot of those situations where we need to make sure that those places that have been there for thousands of years protected are there for future generations. And so we are working on that and trying to come up with treatments for each one of those sites and do a survey into their condition. The bear team that was out there, they spent about 6 days on the island, and they only are able to do about 10% of the total footprint of whatever they're studying. So they saw 10% of the archaeological sites, for example, and then inferred that, approximately the percentage that were damaged, right? But we have to go out to 100% of the archaeological sites and get them secure. Wildlife, there was obviously some habitat loss here, major habitat loss. We're going to see shifting populations all over the islands. We're going to be very busy studying what these creatures do in response to the fire. It was pupping season for the island fox. And while adult foxes can likely run away, those pups and kits, they have a harder time with that. So you can imagine there's some damage on that front. We know that there is some take on other megafauna as well. A lot of the direct mortality, though, was limited. A lot of the species are mobile and were able to move to other parts of the island. But that habitat is obviously changed for quite a period of time. So we have almost 40% of the island that burned. So that 40% of wildlife that lived there is being pushed into the other 60% of the island. And so how does that shake out? We don't know. But there's going to be competition for food and habitat, among other things. We did find out that the snowy plovers and the black abalone, upon initial assessment, were okay, which was good news. But we're going to need to do a tremendous amount of monitoring in addition to what we normally do on these islands to learn more. And here's our little snowy plover friend. They were mainly protected. We found out, even though the fire burned very close to the beaches, a lot of the species were protected. And I'll show you some other ones that were okay throughout the fire in general. So vegetation, long story short here, we lost about 54% of our manzanita on the island. We lost 60 to 80% of Torrey pines are forecasted to die within the next year based upon initial assessments. We have better news on some of the rare plant species that exist only in one place on the world, and that only place is fully within the burn area. And those have largely survived. They were closer to those beach areas and did better. There's a lower burn temperature in those areas. So what happens when you denude an area? You can see here, this is Telephone Road. So some of this, and don't blame the firefighters, we asked them to do it. Some of this is defensive burning, where they're setting up a black line so that the fire doesn't burn right through. But on these lines, you'll see particularly pronounced burning because the fire comes up right against it, and it's there for some time as they're fighting it, right? So it's really spending a bunch of time right there and presenting itself. So the Torrey pines, as I mentioned, one of only 2 groves. Anybody know where the other one is?
Torrey pines.
Yeah, PGA, they put a golf course on it. But there is a state preserve down in San Diego as well. I think they're largely not listed because they are protected or in protected places. But we treat them as if they were. These species are utterly rare and live in a very small portion of the island. And you can see them from the pier when you arrive. They like sandy soils, and they like to be tortured a little bit. They like some cold air blowing in. They like hard winds. They've survived in this type of climate, but they're just not fire adapted. The fire history on the islands is very limited. And we'll get into recommendations on this, but it's going to take a generation for these trees to come back. A Torrey pine hitting maturity takes about 60 years. So what we lose is a real loss. I'm not going to skim over that. This is probably the hardest news that the park got. So yeah, here's just a picture to give you an idea of some of the groves. It was much more intense heat. This is what you're seeing here. Another video. This one's posted online. I won't play it. Oh, it's going to play. Look at that. You can see some areas here where the crowns were burned, but a lot of the crowns were saved, right? This is what we saw initially, and what you saw initially in the press was, oh, those crowns are there, they must be alive. We didn't put that out there. I think it was just what people logically jumped to, and we wanted that to be true, but it's probably not going to be true. You can the trail that we were looking at earlier was the Torrey Pine Trails. That's going to be closed for a very long time. It's not only dangerous, but it's also eroding down the side of the hill at this point. A lot of stabilization work is going to be needed in the Torrey Pines. Historic structures. This is the rec line camp building, and it has corrals associated with it. Line camps where they would take cattle to graze elsewhere, essentially away from the main ranch. So a line camp isn't the main ranch, it's part of a line that they use for dispersing the cattle, feeding areas. Here we have a World War II era structure, garage that burned to the ground. We're also going to have some hazmat cleanup out there based on the era of construction. And the cloud forests, cautiously good news. There were some saplings that burned and some younger trees, but all of the old growth trees survived. And the line literally came up to the trees. I mean, it was at the base of the trees when they were able to push it back. This is really good news. This is not part of the emergency actions because it wasn't directly impacted by the fire. But we are going to continue our efforts to try to restore this forest, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about why we're worried about this still this year. All right, so let's talk about recovery. That was a heavy chapter. Recovery is going to involve a lot of people and a lot of money and a lot of time. There's no way around it. Over 18,000 acres is the largest wildland fire in Channel Islands history, not just within the park, but the entire chain. And almost 40% of an island is a major fire. So this is going to take time to heal. So we're trying to call up our partners. You saw NASA's sort of really cool images during the fire that helped us understand some of the burn severity. USGS has been working on that restoration project in the cloud forest. They have just funded, as of last week, they've agreed to fund into the future another scientist to follow the one that just retired, focused on the cloud forest. So that's very good news for us. We're going to need it. We're also going to need someone to do the same thing with the Torrey Pines, essentially. And it's going to take a real team effort. But they are coming to our assistance now. So we talked about impacts. This is the recommendations, what we're going to do about it. We're closing hazardous areas. The whole island's closed today. We'll talk a little bit about when it opens. Improving drainage systems. We're going to have to get out there and literally dig out culverts that have been probably stocked up for years, but given how the landscape is right now, if a culvert bursts through, you're going to have major damage. You can take out a hillside, essentially. You don't want that much water all at once, and we're set to get a lot of water this year. Erosion control measures. It's another way of saying wattle. So we're looking at over 2 miles of wattles. Has anyone ever rolled a wattle? Okay, all right, we have some experience. Is that an intimidating number of wattles? I asked you to do 2 miles tonight? Okay, yeah, it's going to take a while, right? They're about 8 feet long. It's going to take you maybe an hour to roll it and put it where it needs to go. And you're going to have to do that piece by piece. So massive amounts of work that needs to get done as soon as possible. Monitoring wildlife, we're going to continue to do. Controlling invasive plants is going to be a huge project in its own. Scorpion fire, that's the vast majority of our time out there, is making sure that invasive plants don't take over those native habitats. And revegetating the burnt areas, a lot of outplanting, and we have nurseries out there, a nursery out there for this purpose, but it's going to have to grow massively to support this project. The bar. The bar is the 5-year one, right? 5 years plus. So we're looking at infrastructure, minor assets, trails, culverts, access routes to maintain safety and reduce erosion. The recovery of the Torrey Pines we talked about. The Manzanita restoration is going to be, if folks had a keen eye, that Telephone Road shot, those were Manzanita, the black charred things up to the side of the road, very hard to recognize when they're burnt like that. Conduct sustained invasive plant detection and treatment, protect cultural sites like we mentioned, and then maintain public safety and oversight. You guys might think that's all fun and games. It's harder than it sounds. So the next year, really what we're going to be focused on is emergency stabilization. And if the rain forecast comes through like it's projected to, and I'll show you a picture of that, it's going to be a really tough goal to hit. We're going to need to mobilize an entire restoration team, including a team leader who've actually gotten funded through this project quickly. So we need to hire them, we need to get them out there, and we're going to need to equip them with everything they need to put in 2 miles of walls and everything else that we need to do to prepare for the upcoming season. We don't have a lot of time. So some good news is that among all the chaos, we are restoring day use out to the island on July 1st. And we're going to run a few boats a week and see how it goes. The way the National Park Service does its visitor use monitoring management framework is by starting sort of small and working our way bigger. So overnight, we're not making a decision on quite yet. We'd like to see if the signs that we're putting out there in engineering are guiding people to where they need to go and keeping them away from the dangerous areas or areas where they could cause damage to resources. And we're hoping it works, and we're hoping the public goes out there and enjoys themselves and continues to get inspired by the non-burnt parts and maybe learns a little bit about fire ecology. But if that doesn't work, we'll go back the other way towards closures. If it does work really well and we can make ourselves comfortable, we'll start taking a look at camping potentially sometime in August. So everything you see here is the closure area. It's really hard to tell, but you can get down on the beach to Black Rock, which is this area here. You're not allowed to go up Water Canyon, and it's essentially staying within a radius of the main ranch. And when you're going out there for a day trip, by the way, as we mentioned, you don't have a lot of time. You're gonna miss the boat if you decide to go hiking too far. So it'll be a controlled experiment for us to do, and we think we can do it safely. So what we're up against, this is, the dark red is the bad stuff. That's a very strong El Nino. You're looking at a NOAA forecast as late as I could find from this month. The slightly lighter bar below it is a strong El Nino. And below that, you're getting into the lighter stuff down here is weaker El Nino. These, SON, that doesn't sound like a month, does it? These are actually 3 months in a row. So September, October, November, we're taking the average forecast. It's very confusing. It took us a while to stare at it. But you can see by kind of combining those, they're sort of leveling off the cliffs between the months. And what you get between October and around about February, a very high probability of a super El Nino. And that's not the official term, it's very strong El Nino, but if you read it in the press, it's super El Nino. So what this means is if this does hit, this will be the first such weather system to hit the island since the 1880s. And the 1880s are when we saw a massive die-off of the first round of oak trees being damaged up in the cloud forest. that were kind of denuded a little bit by ranching, didn't have as many roots as before, and really took poorly to those storms. On the positive side, we're doing everything we can. I can tell you, taking a look around at our park staff, you have a heck of a team working on your behalf to try to save this place. We have, boats, helicopter operations. We're purchasing additional transportation, UTVs out on the islands, because you need to get around to your site where you're going to be working. And we're taking the main ranch house, which was restored back in 2018 into 19, and is been sitting there. So we're converting that into housing, which is going to need to build a kitchen and do some other things. But that's where actually Channel Islands National Park Foundation has been godsend in terms of helping support those efforts, because our own federal contracting would take at least many months, and we're trying to make this happen quickly. A little bit about hope. The technology we're applying right now, this is how we used to do things. So this is an archaeological survey. They're taking a look at the decline of cliffs and how quickly they're subsiding on the terrain, which means going down into the ocean. We used to do it with a camera, and we'd take pictures of stakes, essentially, and that's how we figure out how quickly it was moving to the ocean. You can imagine this took a lot of time, pretty limited in terms of where you can do it too. You just have to take samples, right? This is some of what we use today. Again, this is pretty limited as to where you can do it, but this is a 3D imagery device called a Trimble, and it gets you down from sort of meters of movement to millimeters of movement. And that makes a big difference, but again, hyper-localized. What we're going to be using is some technology we're working on with NASA. Here in this chart, this is publicly available technology, just it's the processing of it that takes some time. Red means that the island's rising, blue means that it's subsiding. So what you see is dark blue areas where the island is subsiding, and those two circles are areas where they expected over the 10 years they were looking at that there was heavy landslide activity. And indeed, we sent our team out there, and there was. And there was something we needed to do about that, which was engage with the tribe on the next steps. So takeaways, you have the largest fire in Channel Islands history. We're in a bit of a race. If there's a moment of relaxation after the fire, we stopped it, didn't burn down the entire island, quickly followed by the assessment of, oh my goodness, we've got a real job on our hands, and that's what we're setting about to do. Restoration is going to take years, millions of dollars, and thousands of person hours. But this park has done this before in different forms, whether it's bringing back the island fox, fighting wildland fires, responding to any stripe of emergency. Our team's been in it and for years in the past before. So I like our track record, and I think we can do this again. And there's hope for recovery. We are positioned on the shoulders of the stewards before us who have taken very good care of this place, have also taken impeccable records, decades of inventory and monitoring data. It's going to come into play, and it's going to tell us what the baseline was before the fire, so we can try to get back there and take the right scale of action to get there. So I know when I see a fire, I get really excited and want to do something. Maybe part of why I'm in this job, but there are ways to get involved right now. We don't have a lot of direct volunteer opportunities. There's, like I said, there's a lot of ecologists out there. There's a lot of experts on the resource that are out there making it better. Those will come in the future, months and years. But right now, Channel Islands National Park Foundation is doing everything they can. Their website's up there. And the California Institute of Environmental Studies are going to be sort of our lead team working on the Torrey Pine project and the manzanitas. So we're already recruiting a heck of a team. If you want to get involved, those are ways to channel your energy and kind of keep an eye out for future invitations to get engaged. And there is already regrowth. I don't leave with all doom and gloom. Nature in some areas will heal itself, but like I said, we've got a big project otherwise, but it's out there doing what it can right now. Whoop, official theme template. All right, thank you for your time.